For the longest time, I thought I understood A Court of Thorns and Roses. I thought I knew why people loved it. The romance, the fantasy, the beautiful fae, the danger, the enemies to lovers tension, the masks, the courts, the magic, the impossible men with impossible cheekbones. And yes, all of that is part of it. But after looking at the story again, really looking at it, I think I finally understand why A Court of Thorns and Roses became so much more than just another fantasy romance series. Because underneath all the magic, underneath Prythian, underneath the romance and the fan art and the endless debates about which character is better, A Court of Thorns and Roses is fundamentally about what happens when someone who has spent their entire life surviving is finally given permission to want more. And that changes everything. When we first meet Feyre Archeron, there is nothing particularly glamorous about her life. She isn't a princess. She isn't secretly living in a palace. She isn't waiting for adventure. She's hungry. Her family is struggling. Winter is brutal, and the responsibility for keeping everyone alive has somehow fallen onto her shoulders. That's important, because Feyre doesn't begin this story dreaming about destiny. She begins it thinking about food, about firewood, about whether there will be enough money, about whether her sisters will eat, about whether her family survives another week. And I think that's the first thing A Court of Thorns and Roses gets incredibly right. Fairy's world is already frightening before anything magical ever appears. Her greatest enemy isn't a monster, it's scarcity, it's responsibility. It's the feeling that if she stops moving, everything around her falls apart. She has learned to survive by making herself useful. And if you've ever been the person who always has to hold everything together, that idea hits differently. Then Feyre kills the wolf, and suddenly she is dragged across the wall into a world she has been taught to fear her entire life. A world of fairies, magic, ancient power, beautiful estates, danger hidden behind elegance. And this is where the story begins doing something interesting. Because Prythian isn't just another fantasy kingdom. To Feyre, it represents something she has almost forgotten exists: abundance. For the first time in years, there is enough food, there is warmth, there are beautiful clothes, there are people around her who are not immediately depending on her for survival. And she doesn't know what to do with that. That is such an important part of Feyre's character, because people who have lived in survival mode don't magically relax the moment they're safe. Sometimes safety itself feels suspicious. Feyre enters the spring court expecting traps. She assumes kindness has conditions. She expects every gift to create a debt. She keeps waiting for the moment when everything will be taken away. And suddenly, A Court of Thorns and Roses becomes less about a human girl entering a magical world, and more about watching someone slowly discover that life can contain things other than obligation. Beauty, art, curiosity, desire, choice. And then there's Tamlin. Now, regardless of where you eventually stand on Tamlin, and A Court of Thorns and Roses fans definitely have opinions about that, his role in the first book matters, because at this stage of Feyre's life, he represents something she desperately needs: relief. Someone else is strong enough to protect the house. Someone else knows where the food is coming from. Someone else understands the dangers around her. For once, Feyre isn't the only person carrying everything, and that creates space for something she hasn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time: vulnerability. That's what makes the romance work in the beginning. It's not simply that Tamlin is powerful or attractive, it's that Feyre slowly begins realizing she doesn't always have to be useful in order to deserve something good. She can paint because she wants to paint. She can walk outside because she wants to explore. She can enjoy a meal without calculating how much is left. She can feel attraction. She can laugh. She can become curious about the world. For someone whose entire identity has been built around survival, those things are revolutionary. And I think this is where a lot of people who haven't read A Court of Thorns and Roses misunderstand why its fans become so attached to it. From the outside, it's easy to reduce the story to girl meets attractive fairy, girl enters magical world, girl falls in love. But emotionally, the story is asking a much bigger question. What happens when the person who has always saved everyone else finally discovers that they are allowed to have a life of their own? That's the fantasy. Not the wings, not the magic, not even the romance. Freedom. And then the book takes that freedom away. This is where A Court of Thorns and Roses shifts. The beautiful fantasy becomes dangerous. The romance becomes sacrifice. And Feyre is forced to make a choice. She could walk away. She could return to the human world. She could tell herself that she has already done enough. Instead, she goes back. And that choice tells us almost everything we need to know about her. Because Feyre's greatest strength isn't that she's the most powerful person in the room. At this point, she isn't. She's human. She's vulnerable. She's surrounded by beings stronger, older, and more dangerous than she is. But Feyre keeps choosing to act, even when she's terrified, even when she doesn't completely understand what she's walking into, even when the odds are ridiculous. And that's why the trials underneath the mountain work so well. They strip the story down to its core. Feyre cannot win because she is stronger. She has to survive through stubbornness, observation, pain tolerance, improvisation, love, and sometimes sheer refusal to stop. The exact qualities that kept her family alive in that frozen cottage become the qualities that allow her to challenge something far larger than herself. The survival skills that once trapped her become her weapons. And then there's Rhysand. Even in the first book, before the story fully reveals who he is or what he will eventually mean to Feyre, he changes the energy of every scene he enters. Because Rhysand represents uncertainty. With Tamlin, Feyre understands the role she's stepping into. With Rhysand, she doesn't. He is dangerous, provocative, manipulative, helpful, cruel, protective, sometimes seemingly all at once. And that ambiguity is compelling. Because suddenly the story stops giving Feyre easy categories, human and fairy, good and evil, monster and savior. Those boundaries start becoming less stable, and the series will eventually build an enormous amount of its appeal around that idea. People are not always what they first appear to be. The frightening character may become the person who understands you best. The safe place may become suffocating. The villain may have reasons. The hero may have flaws. And the person you were at the beginning of the story may not be the person you need to remain. That's another reason I think A Court of Thorns and Roses connects so intensely with its audience. The series constantly gives its characters permission to change. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but dramatically. People make terrible decisions. They misunderstand one another. They hurt each other. They recover. They regress. They rebuild. And because the book spends so much time inside intense emotional experiences, readers don't just observe those changes. They feel like they're living through them with the characters. That's why people argue about these characters as though they're discussing people they actually know. Because after hundreds of pages, they almost feel that way. But there is another ingredient A Court of Thorns and Roses understands incredibly well. Escapism. And I don't mean that negatively. There is a reason fantasy has always been powerful. Sometimes reality is exhausting. Work, bills, responsibilities, expectations, schedules, stress. Life becomes very practical very quickly. Then you open a book, and suddenly there are mountains glowing under stars, ancient cities hidden from the world, courts built around seasons and darkness and light, impossible creatures, dangerous bargains, magic that feels older than history, characters who love violently, hate dramatically, and make choices that reshape entire kingdoms. A Court of Thorns and Roses gives readers permission to feel things at maximum volume, and sometimes that is exactly what people want from fiction. Not realism, intensity, but the fantasy only works because the emotional foundation underneath it is recognizable. Feyre wants freedom, Nesta wants control, Elaine wants peace, Tamlin fears losing what he loves, Rhysand hides vulnerability behind power. Every magical conflict eventually connects back to something painfully human: fear, grief, jealousy, trauma, hope, love, the need to belong somewhere. And that last one might be the biggest of all: belonging. Because A Court of Thorns and Roses is filled with characters searching for the place and the people where they can finally become themselves. That's why found family becomes such an important part of the series. It's not just about finding people who will protect you. It's about finding people around whom you no longer need to perform. People who know the worst things about you and stay. People who challenge you. People who laugh with you. People who give you room to become someone new. And I think that's where the obsession really begins. So after spending more time with this world, I don't think people love A Court of Thorns and Roses simply because it's romantic, or because it's spicy, or because the Fey are attractive. Those things certainly don't hurt, but they're not the real reason this series became a phenomenon. People love A Court of Thorns and Roses because beneath all the spectacle is a fantasy that is much more personal. The fantasy that your life doesn't have to remain the way it is, that surviving isn't the same thing as living, that the version of yourself created by difficult circumstances doesn't have to be your final version, that there might be another world beyond the wall, another city beyond the mountain, another person you haven't met yet, another version of yourself you haven't become yet, and maybe you are allowed to want it. That's what I think I finally understand about A Court of Thorns and Roses. The magic gets you through the door, the romance keeps you turning pages, but the real reason people stay is transformation. And once you see the story that way, the obsession makes a lot more sense.
Follow for more. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for full videos.